Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking a massive structural transformation that is happening completely quietly within the global financial architecture. For years, right, the conversation around digital assets has been entirely dominated by the noisy, super-emotional retail crypto hype. But beneath the surface, a profound shift is taking place. We're talking about a silent coup of institutional math. We're going to dive deep into the machine economy and look at how networks like Cardano are literally positioning themselves to be the ultimate settlement layer for artificial intelligence. We're leaving human speculation in the dust and entering an era where algorithms and AI manage absolutely vast amounts of utility and capital.
So, let's dive into this by starting with a totally fascinating thought experiment. How exactly does an AI in Germany pay an AI in Singapore? Think about it. Imagine a futuristic but honestly rapidly approaching scenario where software agents act completely autonomously. These aren't people, they are complex pieces of code that need to buy storage space, secure compute power, and acquire massive data sets across borders in real time. They can't exactly walk into a local bank branch, show a driver's license to satisfy KYC laws, and open a traditional account, right? Human banking systems are stuck with business hours, multi-day delays, and international borders. AI operates in milliseconds. These autonomous agents need a system that skips human banks entirely.
And the solution points to a radically different digital infrastructure. We are moving toward a reality where these autonomous AI agents use something called the X42 protocol. In super simple terms, this protocol is just a standard that allows machines to communicate, negotiate, and transact value with one another instantly. Zero human friction, zero human oversight. Through this protocol, they use digital assets, specifically ADA, tokens, as the automated commodity fuel for this whole new digital economy. It basically functions as the foundational rocket fuel powering a completely new era of industrial-scale machine-to-machine commerce all over the globe.
Here is what we are looking at today. First, the machine economy awakens. Second, the AI settlement problem. Third, the Voltaire legal shield. Fourth, regulated corporate commodity. And finally, number 5, the automated utility rail. Let's jump right into section 1, the machine economy awakens and the paradigm shift. So there is just a stark contrast between the past and the future of digital assets. On one side, you have humans sending money. This era has historically been driven by human emotion, wild speculation, and, user interface dependent hype. It's a space totally dictated by fear and greed. But on the other side, we see the inevitable future, machines sending money. This environment is fully autonomous, it's driven by frameworks like the X42 protocol, and it relies strictly on cold, clinical, institutional math. And by institutional math, I mean programmed execution based on strict logical parameters. Machines do not feel fear when a market price drops 5%, right? They simply execute their underlying code to buy the exact data or computational utility they need to keep functioning. Moving to section 2, the AI settlement problem, and bypassing the legal roadblock. Now, for this global AI commerce to actually thrive, these software agents have got to navigate some pretty severe legal liabilities. Corporate AI models simply cannot take the legal risk of transacting in assets that regulators classify as securities. Think about it. If an autonomous AI agent is executing millions of microtransactions every single second using an unregistered security, the parent corporation could face massive, totally devastating lawsuits from regulatory bodies like the SEC. To comply with incoming frameworks like the highly debated Clarity Act of 2025, corporations need absolute legal certainty. This demands a pure, decentralized commodity with zero central points of failure. They need an asset with a fixed, totally unmanipulable supply like a hard cap of 45 billion tokens. And it must operate on a settlement layer that is fast, cheap, and completely immune to regulatory capture. Basically, they require digital gold, but with highly functional industrial utility. Which brings us to section 3, the Voltaire legal shield and the action scientist logic. So, the Voltaire era represents a highly calculated maneuver into deep mathematical decentralization. Through this transition, the network essentially forged a literal legal shield. And how did they do that? By transferring decision-making power away from a central foundation and handing it over to a liquid democracy made up of thousands of independent DREPs, or delegated representatives, positioned all over the globe. The underlying logic here is actually brilliant. Centralized institutions are vulnerable. You can subpoena a CEO, you can find a central headquarters, but you cannot subpoena a mathematical algorithm, and there is no way to coerce a decentralized web of thousands of independent users. The ultimate defense lies right in the network's foundational architecture. A critical part of the source material notes, by surrendering the Genesis keys, it proved that no single entity controls the chain. To put that into perspective, Genesis keys act as the foundational, master control codes of a blockchain. By voluntarily giving up those keys, the original creators literally locked themselves out of the control room. They threw away the keys. They ensured the network couldn't be fined, shut down, or forced to alter its code by any single government agency, because there was literally no one entity left with the power to execute that demand. The vast majority of the network holds the power. And legally speaking, that absolute lack of centralized control is a primary requirement for an asset to be officially recognized as a true, decentralized commodity. On to Section 4. Regulated corporate commodity and the institutional reality.
With that legal shield firmly in place, algorithmic adoption quietly follows. Just recently, Grayscale, which is the world's largest digital asset manager, mechanically rebalanced its large-cap fund. This rebalancing slashed their exposure to various legacy assets and resulted in an 18.33% allocation directly into Cardano. Now, this was not some discretionary human guess attempting to time market prices, right? This was a mathematical mandate executed by an algorithm that strictly reallocates capital based on market maturity and liquidity. It is a direct recognition of an asset achieving the status of a regulated corporate commodity.
Another data point that institutional observers watch like hawks is capitalization. Currently, a totally decentralized, community-owned treasury holds 1.7 billion ADA, operating with absolutely zero debt. In traditional finance, analyzing a balance sheet is crucial. A protocol that carries no debt while maintaining a massive self-funding war chest for infrastructure and development offers massive stability. It means the network is entirely economically self-sustaining. It doesn't have to go begging venture capitalists for rounds of funding, a process that usually ends with those same VCs dumping their tokens on the open market to exit their positions. Instead, the network funds its own growth purely through decentralized treasury mechanics.
The timeline for institutional adoption follows a very clear mathematical progression. Let's break it down. In late 2025, the governance system undergoes rigorous stress testing to prove its resilience. Right after that, on February 9, 2026, CME futures commence trading globally. CME futures are regulated derivatives that basically legitimize an asset for high-level Wall Street trading, allowing institutions to hedge their positions. Fast forward to August 9, 2026, and the SEC's mandatory 6-month maturation period for those futures officially clears. That maturation clears the runway directly to October 23, 2026, which is the final binding SEC deadline for Grayscale's spot ETF application. An approved spot ETF represents the opening of the floodgates, allowing traditional capital from retirement accounts and pension funds to flow directly into the asset. We are literally watching a calculated transition where major asset managers are positioning themselves well ahead of these dates.
And finally, Section 5, the automated utility rail and engineering the future. The network's Vision 2030 document entirely rejects short-term speed hype, focusing instead on the high-assurance metrics that are absolutely necessary for legitimate commercial execution. We're talking targets like 324 million annual transactions, 1 million monthly active users, and $3 billion in total value locked. But the most critical metric for enterprise adoption, it's the non-negotiable 99.98% structural uptime. Look, if a consumer social media app goes down for an hour, it is an annoyance. But if the underlying financial settlement layer for a global autonomous AI economy goes offline, the cascading failures across supply chains and data networks would be absolutely catastrophic. Institutions demand secure, predictable, and permanent infrastructure. Achieving those high-assurance targets requires methodical injections of advanced cryptographic upgrades. A perfect example of this is the Van Rossum hard fork, or Protocol version 11, named in honor of the late ecosystem contributor Max Van Rossum. This upgrade drastically enhances smart contract performance and fortifies global node security. But what is truly technically impressive about this update is how it was deployed. Historically, in blockchain ecosystems, major protocol upgrades, which are known as hard forks, require network downtime or risk violently splitting the chain into two competing networks. We've seen that happen with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Executing a major structural upgrade completely seamlessly, without freezing a single transaction or dividing the community, demonstrates the rigorous, high-level software engineering required to power the complex, multi-asset calculations of the incoming AI economy. It's literally like swapping out a jet engine while flying at 30,000 feet. The structural transformation is well underway. The decentralized legal shield is active, the independent treasury is fully funded and totally secure, and autonomous AI software agents are steadily coming online. Asset managers are quietly aligning with these mathematical and regulatory milestones, transitioning completely away from the retail era and into an institutional framework. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to ponder. Now that you see the institutional blueprint, what are you going to do with the time that is left? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.